As per usual, thanks going out to Bobby and Steve for the last 2 hours of house garage pressure. It's Fabio taking over the helm for the next 2 hours. Playing the baddest beats around town right now. Playing you a flavour called drum and bass. This is how we do Friday night. Live and direct. Doing it D&B style. We've got the flavours tonight, we've got the flavours, so check out the next 2 hours. The first hour, playing you a few tracks you might be familiar with, tracks that are on imminent release, or tracks that are out in your shops as we speak. Kicking off with the sound of Urban Flavour. A track from around 6 months ago. Love the bass drop in that tune. Big shout going out to the Urban Flavour crew down there in Wolverhampton. We're gonna hook one day soon. Also the jazz step coming up at 1 as per usual. I have nothing else to say but listen. 1 till 2, got some absolute stormers. So it's all good, it's all Kiss, it's all Fabio for the next 2 hours.
pirate style. This 100.
Check, check. Check, check. Check, check. Check, check.
In the big bad city.
check.
in the business right now. Andy C's remix of the mighty Immortal Circle. Respects going out to Andy C for that mix. Absolute rinsing mix. Big shout going out to Adam F. Going to be playing you some brand new from Adam coming up during the show sometime. Also respects to everyone that attended Phoenix Festival. That was absolutely banging. Banging session, absolutely riffing in there. Took some life in there that night. Also remember, more details later on about the big festival tomorrow in London, Finsbury Park, the Essential Festival. Should be absolutely riffing. And it's funny, at events like these, you get to hear from old friends that you haven't heard for 7 years or so. Having big conversation, and by the end it's, by the way, can you get any tickets for Phoenix or Essential or whatever festival seems to be running at the time? So all my spars, guest list is out the question, because it's sealed off. So that should be a killer. Gonna be giving you more details on the Essential Festival tomorrow. Big time festival for London. We're gonna go straight into the ad breaker for this tune. See ya.
Pirate style, Kiss 100.
Now that's what I call 100% music.
Back once again. This happens to be Spring Hill Jack and a track entitled Hail Bop, named after the infamous comet that appeared over our skies earlier on in the spring. Bit of knowledge, education, informative. Doc Scott on the remix of this. That's the Spring Hill Jack, a track entitled Hail Bob, and that's the Doc Scott remix. Big shout going out to Doc Scott, his young lady Sarah. After the altercations in Sweden, something quite funny happened at the airport. I won't go into that. Remember, it's Kiss, it's Fabio. This is how we do. This is how we blow up the spot on a Friday night. Got to hail my man Tim Westwood. So big shout going out to Freddie. Big dogs, you know that. Also a shout going out to my man Jumping Jack Frost. Good to see you the other night, Frosty. Also Brian G, the rest of the V crew. Say no more. It's Kiss.
Now that's what I call 100% music.
So I'm going to send this track specially out to James in Aylesbury. And this isn't a track he wanted me to play, but this was the alternative. Santa Carlito. Creative Source Pressure. A track entitled Fall Down, out in your shops very, very soon. So catch it. sound of James Carlito, a track entitled Fall Down. Creative Source on the press. Catch that in your shops in around 4 weeks' time. I'm just going to have a little gripe about something because I won't go into this too tough. But a certain magazine a magazine I've got quite a lot of respect for, decided to print my real name. And then when they got a phone call, tried to say that I was exaggerating. But at the end of the day, if I wanted my real name, I would have called myself my real name. Fabio, of course, is an alias. But it's done for specific reasons, not tax reasons, because I'm a taxpayer. But there's a lot of mad people around at the moment. And I don't need my name printed all over some rag. Thank you very much. Well, enough of that. We're going to go for another pause for a cause. Back after this with more pressure. Remember, you're listening to Kiss. You're listening to the Fabio on a Friday night. This is how we do, blowing up the spots. See you after this.
100% music. Original pirate style. Kiss 100% stamina. Nobody can funk for longer. Nobody.
Monstrous piece of breakbeat there. Sound of Paradox, reinforced pressure. That is a bad tune. The real deal. Right, got to tell you about the Essential Festival. For those of you who went to Brighton, this is part 2, the return in London. Good to see us have a festival on the doorstep of the capital. A massive array of artists, including Massive Attack, Cold Cut, Death in Vegas, Red Snapper, Aphex Twins, 808 States, Propeller Heads, Bentley Rhythm Ace, Represent, Ronnie Size Live, Crust, Rap, Kenny Ken, Future Sounds of London featuring Talvin Singh, Square Pusher, Metalist Tent, Goldie, Grooverider, Randall, Chemistry and Storm, Doc Scott, Pesha and myself. Also Sunday, Roots Day. Get ready for Lee Scratch Perry, Horace Andy, Della Soul, Jungle Brothers, Mob Deep, the mighty Mob Deep, Brand Nubian. Hopefully Graham Pooba will be there alongside them guys. The Brotherhood, British hip-hop at its finest. Steel Pulse, Gil Scott Heron, JTQ, Project 23, amongst many others. I've not even read out a third of the artists that will be appearing over the 2 days. That's the Essential Music Festival. That's going to be at Finsbury Park. And I remember when we first done the Brighton festivals, it used to be a students' union romp in the grass with a few DJs, and now it's turned into one of the biggest festivals in Europe. So respects to Ish and the rest of the guys. I think you're going to blow up this weekend.
Kiss 100% stamina. Nobody can funk for longer. Nobody.
Going into one of my favourite tunes at the moment, absolutely beautiful tune. As I said before, there's nothing wrong with beautiful music. We're kind of inundated with sci-fi horror tunes at the moment, and it's not all about that. Crystal clear beats, lovely bass lines. This is PFM, his remixes of the mighty Lil Louis. Remember French Kiss? Track entitled Clap Your Hands. Check this out. Mighty PFM on the mix. Big shout going out to Mike Bolton, down there in the East Coast. Remember, you're listening to Kiss FM, 100 on the dial. On my travels, I was in Sweden at the Lollipop Festival last week. And that was a cracking good night. Sending out a shout to my homeboy Dave Angel. Album, imminent release on Ireland. Check that out if you're into the techno flavours, because that man's the real deal. Right, we're going to take a pause for a cause. Back after that with a sampler from the Adam F album.
Summertime.
Sound of Adam F, a track entitled Jax. The immensely versatile Adam F, watch out for his album Colours on Positiva coming very, very soon. We got a jazz lick off of that album coming up in the jazz step, which is coming up in around 6 minutes time. Big shout going out to Adam and respects. Also, big shout going out to Justin and the rest of the guys down there. You know who you are. Shout going out to Vicky. Not forgetting Emma and Charlie. And Sherry.
light and shadow.
Music. 100%
Sound of Rob Solomon. Track coming out on Certificate 18. A shout going out to Paul, all the guys representing down there in the Anglia region. We're going to take a last pause for a course for the hour. We'll be back after that with the inimitable Jazz Step.
Music.
Kiss 100% stamina. Nobody can funk for longer. Nobody.
Kicked off the jazz step. The sounds of DJ Worm, a track entitled Innovations. Gotta send a shout out to the Plymouth and Torquay Massive. They're having it down there right now. Also, a big shout to everyone that attended Slow Motion, saw a lot of the scenes hierarchy down there. And as usual, the end sound system left everyone walking out with their ears bleeding and feeling half deaf and feeling like their brains had just been kind of shredded. Gotta send a shout going out to J Magic, the mighty J Magic. Hopefully some brand new on the show next week from J Magic. Also I'd like to say a big hi going out to DJ Trace. Also the No U-Turn crew, Fierce and Ed Rush. Also a shout going out to the Future Forces crew. Not forgetting Clayton and the Trouble and Vinyl. Massive. The biggest shout of all going out to the Groove Connection Massive. Grooverider. Frosty. Brian G. Chemistry and Storm. Mickey Finn. Ray Keith. Also Katie. This is Kiss.
Now that's what I call 100% music. Music. Music.
This is how we do with the jazz flavors. The jazz step. Gotta send a big respects and a big shout out to Ronnie Size, who's been nominated for the Mercury Music Awards alongside such luminaries as the Spice Girls and the Chemical Brothers. That shows you the giant steps drum and bass has made in the last 3 years or so. It's a big shout going out to Ronnie and his impressive New Forms album. Watch out for Crust coming very soon, because his album's going to be mind-blowing. Also a big shout going out to Giles Peterson down there at Talking Loud. Check out the vocoder on this piece. We're going to go straight into ad break after this.
There is a place where you can hide away and let the music in your mind just take control. There is a place where you can fly away and let the music in your mind just start to flow. Let it flow, let it flow, let it flow. Music in my mind, I hear you calling. Music in my mind, I hear you calling me. Music in my mind, I hear you calling me. Music in my mind. There is a place where you can hide away and let the music in your mind just take control.
track entitled Quartz by The Fellowship. Sending that one out to Gary Grant down there on the hill. Also sending it out to all the old tempo soldiers like Osh, Rodney. Not forgetting Top Boy and his girlfriend Sarah. But watch out for a brand new night starting somewhere soon, giving you the flavours, the real flavours. Going right back to square one as you do. So watch out for that, a new night to hit London coming very, very soon. Keep your ears to the ground. rolling into the final 18 minutes or so. Remember, as I said before, tomorrow sorry about that, just having a bit of trouble with this mixer who's she's mutated into its own kind of life form at the moment. But tomorrow at Finsbury Park, do remember that is the big one, the Essential Music Festival. As I said before, there is a whole world of artists down there. No matter what kind of flavours you're into, it is going to be all good. You have the Metalheads tent, also the World Dance. If you prefer your music a bit more jump up and whatever, that's going to be smashing both tents. Also, you have some of the big beat artists around at the moment, Propeller Heads, Bentley Rhythm, Ace, so forth. Also, on the Roots Day on Sunday, you got artists like Steel Pulse, also Project 23, JTQ, etc. The tickets are almost sold out, so it's going to be pressure to get in there. So if you haven't got a ticket, it's best to stay at home because you will not be getting in. Right, I'm going to draw this up because we're going to go to an ad break back after with Future Elements, Carlito. Forthcoming on Creative Source, the mighty sounds of Carlito featuring Addiction. A big shout going out to Addiction. Also Helen T and the rest of the camp down there at IDM. Some brand new flavours from them on their show next week, so check it out. Starting to fumble a little bit, so time to make the music play.